Welcome to the Australasian Law Management Journal and our Q&A podcast series. Through these podcast interviews, we are telling the stories and exploring the leadership and business strategies of some of the leading minds in the Australian legal sector.
Hi, I'm Cameron Cooper, editor of the Australasian Law Management Journal. Today, in our Q&A series, we're speaking to Will McCullough, a sole practitioner who runs his own thriving firm called MCC Advisory, which specialises in IP, technology and commercial law. In this interview, Will tells us about his journey from being a UK lawyer to becoming an Australian success, along the way sharing insights on the tech platform that has helped him become highly efficient in the absence of support staff. And he also tells us why he plans on keeping his firm super small. Well, Will, thanks for joining us today for the Q&A. I was reading your profile and noticed that you came out to Australia, I think, when you were about 15. I'm just want you to maybe start by telling us about that lucky break coming out to Australia.
Yeah, it was actually a bit later than 15. I think I was 26 or 27 when I came out.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But maybe my first trip to Australia was when I was 15. But I moved out here for work when I was 27. So I think, look, I was lucky enough to have lived in lots of different places growing up. My dad was in the army, so we moved around a lot. And, after 5 years practicing in the UK, I think it was natural for me to start looking for somewhere else, somewhere overseas to try practice. In Australia, it was relatively easy to convert the UK practice to Australian practice, and look, the lifestyle seemed really good. And my brother and his family lived out here in Queensland, so yeah, I moved to New South Wales, and the rest is history.
Well, it sounds like it's been going well. My understanding is 5 years of MCC Advisory so far. Maybe tell us a bit how you came to setting up the firm and how it's been going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I worked in various small and large firms. I was a sort of mid-tier firm in the UK and a large firm in Australia, McCullough, and look, really enjoyed the work there. I sort of started out as a corporate lawyer doing due diligence on transactions, and a lot of the companies that we were looking into were IT and technology companies. And so I sort of moved from being a corporate lawyer to a technology lawyer and started to develop a client base of my own. And a lot of those clients I found were really very interested in sort of talking to me and speaking to me. And it was more of a consultancy type arrangement than a traditional sort of leveraged law firm model. So that sort of got my head thinking, am I missing a trick here really? Is the reality that I don't actually need the wider law firm model to allow me to practice law for the clients that need my help. And so sort of it was a process of several years thinking about it, and eventually I just took the plunge, and I haven't looked back since.
I have to ask you about McCullough Robertson with your name, McCullough. Was there any family connection there at all, or not?
Absolutely not. We've gone back as far as we need to, and I think we're pretty confident there's no nepotism at all involved there. But it is a really interesting firm, and they can trace their roots right back to the two founders, I think, one of who was McCullough. And no relation as far as we know, unless it's some sort of secret that's been repressed over the years in my family. But I don't think so, no. But we did have a lot of fun with that when I worked there.
Absolutely, yes. You mentioned that you're working in tech law, commercial law, IP law. It seems like you're in a great space at the moment, being in that tech side, that IT side.
Yeah.
This is really such a growth area. Is that how you see it? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. Between changes in privacy law, between everyone becoming more aware of their rights around data, both from businesses' perspective, understanding what they need to do with data, and consumers knowing what their rights are. And then all the way through to some of the emerging stuff like Gen AI. There's a big piece that I'm doing right now for an enterprise here with Gen AI components, and it is just so interesting. And look, I'm pretty lucky to be able to work on transactions that really set me at the front of some of Australia's coolest and most developing technology trends, which is great for me. Keeps me interested.
And clearly you have a strong tech bench yourself, from what I understand. But
Yeah, that's right.
Being competitive as a sole practitioner in this IT space where there's a lot of competition, no doubt. How do you ensure that you are competing with those bigger firms?
I think the big firms will always have a really, really strong reach into larger organizations. I think one of the areas where I'm able to penetrate the market a little bit more selectively or craftily is by sort of going in a little bit below those major enterprises and finding those small to medium-sized enterprises, those owner-managed businesses, many of whom are tech-based. Maybe they've done their first few rounds of venture capital or private equity. And that's a really great place for me to come in, not quite at the ground level, but sort of on floor one, and start as they start to grow, start providing them with that sort of top end of town legal advice, but at a price that remains accessible for them. So then as they grow, the natural progression of things is that they grow using my firm. And it's sort of the question that never arises, who else should we be using? Because I've been in there from day one, and know what they were sort of struggling with in those first few days and years. And then it just never really moves from there unless they get bought or sold, which is great for me because I sort of feel like I'm part of the furniture.
And clearly, if they're happy with your work, you're going to get repeat work, lots of referrals. It sounds like that's what's been happening.
Well, that's right. I mean, to be honest, I do very little traditional business development activities. Most of my net new client base comes from word of mouth referrals from my existing client base, which is awesome, and it's a real privilege to have someone recommend your firm to one of their counterparts in the market. It's really cool.
And it sounds like things are going great. You were a finalist in the sole practitioner category in the Australian Law Awards. Congratulations on that.
Oh. Well, I didn't win, and I think it's the fourth time I've been a finalist. So I'm going to have to go back to square one next year and work out what it is that they're looking for because it's time. I feel like it's time for the win.
The good news is you keep getting nominated, so you're obviously consistent.
Yeah, that's right. Very well. So I'm sort of getting halfway there. Yeah. That
sort of raises the questions. You're doing very well, but clearly there must have been challenges along the way. What are some of the key things? Like when I talk to some of the other law firm leaders, they're constantly talking about getting enough talent, managing this work-life balance, those sorts of things. But what about for you?
I'd say for me, it's work-life balance and it's also work-work balance. I think I'll explain to you what I mean by that. But as a sole practitioner, there's no sort of team around you because I'm a true sole practitioner. There's no support staff or anything. And so there's no one to share the load with you. So I have to do all the client business development and then do the work and then do all the practice management. And those three sort of things, the finding work, doing the work, sort of running the practice, they themselves create competing tensions. So I think as all busy business people, I like to feel like I'm busy doing productive fee-earning work. But if you spend too much time doing that, you lose track of the client development and what's over the horizon. And then if you sort of snooze on your practice management, then you've got a mountain of filing to do or a mountain of bills that you have to send out or matter maintenance. And so actually juggling those things is quite difficult, and there's kind of no one really to check in with to see how you're going. So that, I guess that's one thing that I've really struggled with over the years is sort of not just doing the work, but also being disciplined about business development and being disciplined about practice management. And then the other thing, and again, it's a product of not having a team around you in the traditional sense, is there's no one to tell you that you're looking frazzled or that you need to take a break. You have to kind of be a little bit more self-aware, perhaps, and a little bit more disciplined than you would be in terms of your own sort of self-care and self-maintenance, because no one's going to tell you when it's time to dial back a little bit. And so being deliberate about getting off the tools at a sensible hour each day, trying not to work weekends, making sure the holidays are holidays, making sure that family meal times, the phone's away, things like that. It's perhaps a little bit more disciplined as a sole practitioner, just to avoid that creep into your work-life balance. Probably something that's shared with most practitioners, but I wonder if maybe it's a little bit more acute as a sole practitioner.
Absolutely. I'm interested because I'm sure your experience is common for leaders of smaller firms. Are there particular technology tools, for example, or platforms that have enabled you to be a bit more efficient on that side of running the business that have helped out?
Absolutely. So when we talk about this, perhaps is partly because I'm a bit of a tech nerd, but we talk about that practice management component. That's the part of the business. So there's the winning work, the doing work, and the practice management. That third pillar, that practice management pillar, is the one that I try to minimize, automate, and reduce my actual human hours on that where possible. So I go in at quite a high-end practice management suite that automates a lot of my billing processes. It automates a lot of my matter management. It sweeps up my email inbox into matter folders automatically after it's been prompted. And that means I'm spending a lot less time doing admin. And the admin that I'm doing is then really, it's quite focused and quite deliberate, sort of, where is my practice going? What areas do I need to focus on more than I did last month? As opposed to, I need to get on top of my filing. My inbox has got 1,000 emails in it. I don't remember what I was asked to do last week. But no, yeah, I use software and tools to, automatically populate a rolling task list with deadlines that I get reminders about, and it works really well. But it's not cheap. But I definitely think the cost of me freeing up that time and that mental bandwidth to do proper fee earning work or BD is an investment that I would make over and over and over again.
Now, I'm not sure if we're supposed to mention brand names, but we're not the ABC. So maybe there would be some sole traders out there or sole practitioners out there thinking, oh, what particular systems are they? Do you want to share those?
That system that I use, I've been through three since setting up 5 years ago. So yeah, a bit of moving around there. And it's a big overhaul to change practice management system. But the one that I've settled on at the moment is called Clio, which is CLIO. And I find it is very good. And I've got visibility of what some of their future updates are going to be. And I think it's keeping competitive, which I think it's the best of the ones that I've tried so far. I won't tell you what the other ones are. But no, Clio, I definitely recommend, and I was recommending it to a colleague today. So yeah, thumbs up.
So suffice to say that people really got to check out the market, see what works really well for their firm, and it can make a big difference by the sound of it.
That's right. And look, I run a corporate commercial practice, so my needs are specific to that. I know that the people who are going down to court or filing court forms are things that they're better served by different, and real estate practices will be better served by different tools. But for my business and my needs, it works really well.
Yeah. And Will, I was going to ask you, because this edition of ALMJ was supposed to be around business development. You've already talked about that. I'll throw you a curveball and say we've changed it to change management, but I'm just interested in terms of being agile, I guess, and being responsive to change. Have you found, it sounds like as a sole practitioner, you really have had to be agile, but talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think when I set up the practice, the intention was always to be agile. I think of that as being a tech business term, but no, agile, absolutely. I associate that with a couple of things. One is ways of working. So being open to using my clients' preferred ways of working. So for instance, if I've got a client that has a workforce all over the world and they're using something like Slack to communicate, Slack's a digital tool, use that to communicate with each other, then I'll hop into their Slack so I can be visible and be present and be communicated with the same way that they would communicate with their staff. So I guess sort of being open to using new technologies in my practice to work with what my clients' needs are sort of aids in that stickiness as a legal practitioner. And I think that's agility. But the other thing that I would say as well was I set up this practice right before COVID hit. And fortunately, I had always planned to run it as a fully virtual firm, in that I don't have offices where people can come in. I would go to clients' offices or would do virtual meetings, which is what I do every day. And I think that kept me light on my feet during COVID, because I think, office overhead was a real killer during COVID. But I wouldn't back away from that. And I've actually doubled down on making sure that I can use Teams, making sure that I can use Zoom, making sure that I can use Google Meet. I can work in Microsoft Word, I can work in Google Docs. And, working across all the platforms, I think for me is being agile, because whatever way the client wants its work served up or however the client wants to interact with me. I'm either already doing it or willing to make changes in my practice to accommodate that. And so I think that kind of no fixed barriers on how I practice is really the secret to how I perceive agility being really beneficial in my practice.
Yeah, I was going to ask you later about client management, your client management style, but it sounds like, being very conscious of their needs, being very present for them is part of it. But what else is working for you, Will?
Yeah, I picked up on when I worked at McCullough Robertson. I worked with a guy called Alex Hutchins, who's a senior partner there still, and he was always really keen to put me in the virtual room with clients. So I got that experience early on, and I got to see his way of practicing with clients, which is to be very approachable, very authentic, and very sincere. And I've sort of tried to take that approach and build on it, which is to kind of, almost demystify a lot of the hocus pocus about working with a lawyer. I think there's a lot of barriers to approaching lawyers. Am I going to get hit with a huge bill? Am I going to get a 100-page legal treatise instead of a two-word answer or 2-page answer? And so a lot of what I do when I'm communicating with clients or developing clients is explaining that, the fee's the fee, and you'll get legal advice that you can actually use. You'll get a document that you can actually use. Obviously, I'll need to sit and listen, take instruction and listen to them and talk to them, but it's all focused about giving them a deliverable that's in their hands, useful to them, and no surprises, no shocks. So no bill shock at the end of the month or anything like that. And the other thing I think is, well, because I'm often on their tools, whether it's Slack or whatever, they can just message me a direct message at any time without stopping and drafting an email and thinking, am I asking this question the right way? It's just breaking down those barriers and making sure that people ask me the question they really want to ask, the way they want it, when they want to ask it. And I think that's working really well.
Yeah, you mentioned you set up the firm just before COVID. You've just celebrated, I believe, 5 years in practice. I think you've already touched upon a number of the lessons, challenges, and so forth. But were there any other lessons sort of that you've learned in those 5 years that maybe you can pass on to other sole practitioners?
I think for me is trying to work out what it is to feel like you're on top of work. Because I think we touched on it earlier with being a sole practitioner and not having a traditional team around you. You've got to work out for yourself what it is to feel on top of work. And then that has to become the most important thing, because the overwhelm and the feeling of, I'm just treading water barely, like it's very, very, very challenging when those feelings come up as a sole practitioner. So for me, it's, being able to unplug and be 100% present with my friends and family whenever I'm not working. And to do that, I'm very fortunate to have, a wife who understands that, sometimes I'm very, very busy. Sometimes I'm a bit more quiet. And sometimes I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I sort of talk to her about that. And she forms part of the team that I now don't have as a traditional, from a traditional law firm perspective. So I think we all as sole practitioners need to work out what is that support network that forms part of that, generating that feeling of, am I on top of work or is work on top of me? I don't think you can do that without a support network around you, whether it's friends, whether it's family, whether it's the team that you play sports with, whether it's, the friends that you see in the pub. I don't think it matters. So long as there's someone around you or some people around you, you can say, guys, I'm just feeling a little bit overwhelmed at the moment, and I think I need to dial back a little bit. And knowing that they'll be there to support you in that decision. Because really, as a sole practitioner, if you dial back on work, you're saying no to money, which is very counterintuitive as a business person. But the long-term benefits of ensuring that you are on top of work, I don't think can be overstated.
Well, you mentioned things are going very well. You haven't got a support team at the moment, which sort of raises the question, where do you go from here? Do you want to grow and expand and bring on lots of staff, or are you content to continue as a sole practitioner? Where do you sit?
I'm really content to continue as a sole practitioner. I think there was a point probably about 2 years ago where there was a real feeling that if I was going to take on staff, that would have been the time to do it. There was huge amount of work on and available. and I could have easily slotted in one or two staff members to work with me on that. But then, you sort of think about what are my objectives about setting up my own practice, and it was about remaining autonomous and remaining flexible in how I work and ensuring that I can provide the clients whose work I take on that kind of like hand-in-glove consultant type service. I thought I decided that for the time being, certainly let's stay a sole practitioner, and it's working really well. And obviously there's matters that come in that are simply too big for a sole practitioner. But then in those circumstances, I work hand in hand with larger law firms to assist. So I sort of would then, in those scenarios, I'd become the quasi in-house counsel I'm doing this right now with one of my clients. I become the sort of quasi in-house legal counsel for the client and assist with briefing the larger firm on the bigger matter. And so, there's ways around it. I think I work best as a sole practitioner at the moment. And until that changes, I think I'll keep it the same way.
So everything's going great. We just now have to get you across the line in the Australian Law Awards for the sole practitioner category. Good luck next year, Will.
Thank you. Thanks, Cameron, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Australasian Law Management Journal Q&A podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. For more law management insights, please visit lmhub.com.au.